You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 140. I'm your host, Colleen Mitchell. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today's episode is the companion episode to episode 138, which was To Epilogue or Not to Epilogue. As I said at the end of episode 138, both epilogues and prologues are these oft-maligned pseudo-chapters. This just means that they both are essentially chapters either at the start or the end of a book, but their contents likely don't directly impact nor are entirely necessary to the plot of the book, starting with chapter 1 and ending with the end. Honestly, I think prologues are actually more maligned than epilogues, only for the fact that they were really popular to write for a while, especially in the fantasy genre, but they serve no real purpose except to show backstory that the main characters could simply learn during the course of the actual plot. While I am a sucker for a well-executed epilogue, a prologue has to be truly magnificent in order to make me not hate it. The real problems I've seen with prologues are these. Number 1, they are about characters who aren't part of the main story. Number 2, they cover periods of time long before the main story begins. Number 3, the information or exposition developed there can be woven into the main story. Number 4, they often read like excuses for the author to present cool pre-story information that really doesn't need to be there. And number 5, they delay a reader making it to the real chapter 1, where your story actually begins. If you are going to use a prologue, you are in essence writing 2 first chapters, and they both have to hook the reader in such a way that the reader doesn't feel cheated on one or the other. Let me give you an example. I started reading a novel with a prologue about a year ago, but I actually DNF'd it relatively early on. I had other issues with this book, but for today, let me tell you about the prologue problem. The book began with a third-person prologue from one person's perspective, an older man watching his grandson on a racetrack. It then head-hopped, or POV switched without warning, to that grandson's perspective. And this is a different literary sin that didn't help my emotional investment in the book, but that is a whole other podcast episode. While I may have been mildly interested in the events of that prologue, what really killed the book for me was when chapter 1 started in first-person POV from yet another person's perspective. So neither the grandson nor the grandfather, completely different person. And there was nothing in that first chapter to tie it back to the prologue. So that's the thing. Prologues need to tie into the plot of the main book somehow, and it needs to be hinted at early on. Otherwise, you're going to lose readers. Think about the readers browsing the bookstore. Their first introduction to your book is either the title on the spine or the cover, depending on how it's presented in the store. Then they flip the book over to read the blurb or the description on the back, and that's your second hook. And then, if you've captured their attention enough with that, they might open the book to read a few pages from the beginning. This process is the same online. It's not just for in-person bookstores. Readers browsing Amazon or bookshop.org, they will see your cover and your title. If it's enticing enough, they'll click on it to see the sales page, and then your book description needs to hook them. Then some readers will use the look inside feature to get a feel for whether they'll like reading the book. If you have a prologue at all, you might instantly repel some readers. Not all readers. There are some readers who love prologues, and some of them happen to be in the 60-day challenge group. But if you manage to hook them with the prologue, you then need to hook them again with chapter 1. And that's a lot of hooking when you could just start with a baller chapter 1. My opinion is that if you can find a way to avoid using a prologue, find it. They are not necessary and may actually do you more harm than good in the long run, especially if you can relate all of the relevant information from the prologue into the main story. Writers like the idea of having a prologue because it offers this spot before the story starts in order to present the reader with some extra pre-story information. But as writers, we have to think about it from the reader's perspective, aka the person who validates your work by giving you money. Readers want to be drawn into a story and suspend their disbelief for a while. They want to escape reality. If your prologue puts them into one world, but the first chapter yanks them out of that first world and then drops them into a second world, you've broken that promise. That's not to say literally different worlds, just that the settings and characters in the prologue are different from the settings and characters in chapter 1. And the promise of the prologue is broken by not tying it effectively into chapter 1. Even Game of Thrones could have axed the prologue. I understand why it was left in. Game of Thrones was published in 1996, and it's almost 30 years old, which makes me feel old to say. But 30 years ago contained a very different generation of readers who were more used to prologues and were more forgiving about them. On the other hand, the prologue to Game of Thrones was actually relevant. It set up and introduced things that were immediately or almost immediately used in chapter 1. So if you still want to write a prologue, go for it. but be open to feedback from critters and editors and beta readers if they don't agree that it fits. This isn't to say to never include a prologue, just that if you want to, it needs to be executed extremely well and be relevant not just to the first chapter, but the entire plot of the book. So what's your take? Do you like prologues? Do you hate them? Like I hate them? I would actually love to hear your thoughts on this through our new texting option in the description. So that's it for today's episode. If this has been helpful for you, I'd appreciate it if you left a rating or review on your platform of choice. While it does nothing for me personally, it does help other writers find this podcast. Thanks for joining me, and remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. Thanks for listening to the Novel Writing Podcast. If you're ready to stop struggling and start finishing your novel, check out the 60-Day Novel Writing Challenge. It's a step-by-step program designed for solo writers to complete their first draft with clarity and focus. Visit the link in the description to learn more.